Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. In this meeting, we will discuss the Quran as the highest source of Islamic law. Dear students, talking about the Quran is certainly not something foreign to followers of Islam or Muslims. Let's listen to how the Quran is a guide and source of law for all Muslims. Al-Quran is kalamullah, which for Muslims contains a guide to the truth for humans. In the view of Muslims, according to Sayyid Hussein Nasr, the Quran is the essence of all books that symbolize knowledge. The Quran provides a solid and unchanging basis for the ethical and moral principles necessary for human life. With the direction of ethical and moral principles on human behavior by the Quran, it will create a life that develops in this world with the ultimate goal of happiness in the hereafter. To capture the ethical and moral message of the Quran requires a complete understanding, because the Quran is a whole which is related to one topic of discussion with other discussions. The Quran is the first source of Islamic law which contains beliefs, worship, warnings, stories that are used as references and guidelines for life for the people of the Prophet Muhammad.
Al-Quran is the totality of Sharia, the main source of wisdom. It is a source of Sharia. The Quran was revealed first in Mecca and continued in Medina. Universal principles were revealed in Mecca. These principles include, among other things, belief in God, the Prophet, and the Day of Judgment. These principles are followed by general rules such as prayer, zakat, and others. Along with the principles, general ethical provisions concerning justice, virtue, patience, and so on are also revealed. These provisions usually diagnose the religious and social practices of pre-Islamic times. There are very few additional special provisions that touch on contractual rules, prohibition of drinking alcohol.
In this regard, the Qur'an explains all the instructions and prohibitions, the boundaries of which are lawful and which are unlawful, good and bad values. Therefore, he provides instructions and guidelines for life in the form of teachings of faith, morals, law, philosophy, politics, worship, and others. These instructions broadly teach humans about the path that humans must follow to become caliphs in the world. The goal is that all aspects of human life can run without any inequality between humans and humans and the universe.
The concept of the Quran in establishing the law. In explaining the law, the Quran uses several ways and expressions, phrases, namely in the form of demands, either demands to act which are called orders or orders, amr, or demands to leave what are called prohibitions, nahi, like the obligation to carry out the prayer command with Allah's command in Surah An-Nisa 4, verse 77, namely, meaning, have you not noticed those who were told to them, hold your hands from fighting, establish prayer and pay zakat? While the actions that are prohibited and must be abandoned, as contained in the letter Al-Isra 17, verse 32, meaning, and do not approach adultery. Indeed, adultery is a heinous act, and a bad way. The Quran was revealed by Allah to the Prophet Muhammad to be a guide and teaching for all mankind. In making orders and prohibitions, the Quran is always guided by two things, namely, 1. Not burdensome, and 2. Gradually. Not burdensome means that Allah will not burden His servant except with His ability.
In terms of its explanation of the law, there are several ways that the Quran uses, namely, 1. Juz'i, detailed. This means that the Quran explains in detail. Allah in the Quran provides a complete explanation, so that it can be carried out according to what is, even though the Prophet did not explain it with his sunnah. 2. Kulli, globally. That is, the explanation of the Quran to the law applies in outline, so it still requires an explanation in its implementation. The most authorized to provide an explanation of the meaning of the verse in the form of an outline is the Prophet Muhammad. With the Sunnah. 3. By Isira. The Quran provides an explanation of what is outwardly mentioned in it in the form of a sign explanation. In addition, it also gives a sign meaning to other purposes. Thus, one verse of the Quran can serve several purposes. Conclusion. The law introduced by the Quran is not something that stands alone, but is an integral part of the Aqidah. Islamic law is the word of Allah SWT. Related to the actions of the mukallaf that are commanding the realization of benefit and preventing the occurrence of crime, the word is in the form of amar, command, nahi, prohibition, takir, choice, or become a cause, condition or barrier to a law. Islamic law has the character of a religious obligation that must be carried out by believers. God's law is still God's law even though no one wants to do it. Islamic law first considers the rights of the community, while the rights of individuals are only protected as long as these rights do not conflict with the rights and benefits of the Ummah. Muamalah in the broadest sense. Al-Qur'an is the highest source of law in the rules of Islamic law, while the 1945 Constitution is also the basis as well as norms in positive legal rules. In the legal system in Indonesia, the Qur'an can be used as a source of law in positive law as well as customary law and Western law, which have contributed to the national legal system, as well as the Qur'an, which is a source of Islamic law, has also contributed to the religious justice system in Indonesia. Thus, there is no longer any view that the application of laws originating from Islamic law is said to be radical and so on. Islamic law as a living law will still exist as a complement to national law. The application and enforcement of Islamic law in Indonesia can be incorporated into national law either through positive Islamic law or through Islamic legal values that apply to all citizens. Both are influenced by political will that will shape the politics of legislation.